Emily Lee stepped off the bus, clutching her backpack tightly to her chest. She looked up at the imposing brick facade of Pacific Grove High, its long rows of windows staring back at her like silent, judging eyes. She was a long way from home. Her small town was quiet, peaceful, and everyone knew each other. But this place? It was overwhelming. Too many faces, too many voices, too many strangers. Emily had always been shy, quiet, and introverted. But here, in the heart of suburban California, her timidity felt magnified, as though everyone could sense her discomfort. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her father, Marcus Lee, a former MMA fighter, had been a legend in the sport. After his injury that forced him into retirement, they moved here, hoping for a fresh start. But now she couldn't help but feel that her father's shadow was already looming over her. The first bell rang, signaling the start of the school day. With a deep breath, Emily walked through the large wooden doors, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with the students bustling around her. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she tried to steady her breath. "Emily Lee?" A voice called out from behind her. She turned, startled, to find a tall girl with short red hair and a friendly smile standing in front of her. "Hi, I'm Sarah," the girl said, extending a hand. "You're new here, right? I'm on the track team. Welcome." Thanks," Emily mumbled, shaking Sarah's hand with a slight bow. She had been taught to show respect, but here, her gesture seemed out of place. Sarah's smile faltered for just a second before she nodded. "Let me show you to your first class." "I know it's always weird the first day," Sarah offered, her tone kind. As they walked through the hallways, Emily couldn't help but notice the whispers and the way some students looked at her, curious, but also judgmental. It wasn't just the newness of being at a bigger school. It was the way she was different. She was quiet, introverted, and worse yet, the daughter of someone famous in a sport she didn't want to associate with. The weight of that reputation settled heavily on her shoulders. When they reached her first class, Sarah gave her a quick wave and disappeared into the crowd of students. Emily took a deep breath before stepping inside. The teacher, Mrs. Lopez, smiled warmly at her as she introduced herself. "Class, this is Emily Lee, our new student. Please make her feel welcome." Emily nodded silently, offering a small, polite smile as she made her way to an empty desk. She sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she unpacked her books. Her heart was racing. The students around her were chatting in groups, laughing, but no one seemed to notice her. She tried to focus on the lesson, but she couldn't help but feel like an outsider. It didn't take long for Tyler Reynolds and his group to notice her. Tyler was the star quarterback at Pacific Grove High, tall and muscular, with a smug grin. That made it clear he was used to being the center of attention. He had a way of walking that made people step aside, and his friends followed him like loyal puppies. Emily felt a presence behind her and turned to find Tyler and his friend, Jake Morgan, leaning against the back of her chair. Their eyes locked for a second, and she quickly turned away, her face flushing with embarrassment. Tyler didn't seem to mind, though. In fact, he leaned in closer, his voice dripping with mock friendliness. "Hey, new girl," Tyler said, loud enough for the class to hear. "You're that MMA girl, right? Marcus Lee's daughter?" Emily's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected this so soon. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, people wouldn't recognize her. But it seemed her father's fame had followed her across the country. She nodded silently, not trusting herself to speak. Her throat tightened. "Cool," Tyler said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I bet you can kick some serious butt, huh?" "Too bad you're not as cool as your dad. I'm guessing you're more of a quiet type." Jake chuckled from behind him, nudging Tyler. "Yeah, she doesn't look like she'd know a thing about fighting. Probably too busy reading books or something." The entire class laughed, and Emily felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. "All right, settle down," Mrs. Lopez called out, her voice sharp. But Tyler and Jake were already walking back to their seats, still, chuckling under their breath. As the lesson continued, Emily could feel their eyes on her, burning into her back. She kept her focus on the desk in front of her, willing the world to swallow her whole. Lunchtime came, and Emily found herself sitting alone at a small table in the corner of the cafeteria. The noise was deafening, students laughing, talking, trays clattering, but she felt isolated, like an outsider who didn't belong. She picked at her lunch, a simple sandwich and fruit, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was staring at her. "Hey, quiet girl," a voice suddenly said, causing Emily to freeze. She looked up to see Tyler and his friends standing at the edge of her table, their trays in hand. "What's that you're eating? Sushi or something?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. "It's a turkey sandwich," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the cafeteria. Tyler smirked, leaning closer. "Sure, whatever you say. Looks like something you'd eat, though." "You know something weird?" Mia Thompson, Tyler's girlfriend, joined in, her voice sugary sweet but dripping with venom. "Yeah, it's like you're so different from us. Can you even understand what we're saying?" Emily's heart pounded, but she kept her head down, hoping they'd just leave. Instead, they hovered, snickering and making more comments. Jake added a few crude jokes about her accent, her clothes, her strange vibe. Every word felt like a jab to her chest, but Emily remained silent, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of her reaction. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Emily quickly gathered her things and stood up, hurrying away. She didn't want to let them see how much their words had affected her, but it was hard to hide the tightness in her chest, the heavy weight of their ridicule. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, feeling every pair of eyes that seemed to track her every move. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, she was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Sarah, who had been friendly earlier, caught up with Emily in the hallway. "Hey, you okay?" she asked quietly, her tone genuine. "You look a little down." Emily nodded, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, just tired." "Don't let them get to you," Sarah added, her voice soft but firm. "People like that just need to tear others down to feel better about themselves." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emily didn't say anything, but she appreciated Sarah's words. As she made her way to the bus, she couldn't help but think about what Sarah had said. Maybe it was true. Maybe Tyler and his friends felt the need to tear her down because of their own insecurities. Still, it didn't make their words hurt any less. That night, as Emily lay in bed, the weight of the day's events pressed down on her. She closed her eyes and thought of her father, who had always been strong and proud. She felt like she could never live up to the expectations he had for her. She had never wanted to follow in his footsteps, but now it seemed like that legacy was all anyone saw when they looked at her. Was there a way to escape it? Would she ever fit in here? The question swirled in her mind, but she had no answers. She could only hope that tomorrow would be a little easier. Over the next few days, things didn't get better for Emily. If anything, they got worse. The whispers grew louder, the stares more pronounced, and the teasing became a daily occurrence. Tyler and his friends, including Jake and Mia, made sure Emily knew that she wasn't welcome at Pacific Grove High. They called her names, mocked her for being quiet, and made fun of her heritage. It didn't matter that she didn't speak much. They had already decided who she was. "Look at her," Tyler said one day as they passed Emily in the hallway. "The silent samurai." Emily didn't respond, but she could hear the laughter that followed. She kept her head down, her hands trembling as she clutched her books tighter. It wasn't just the verbal taunts that stung. It was the way they treated her, like she was invisible, like she didn't matter. It was the way they tried to break her spirit, piece by piece, with each passing day. At lunch, things hadn't improved. Tyler's group found ways to make her feel like a joke. One day, as Emily sat at her usual corner table, eating her lunch in solitude, Jake walked by and kicked her chair. She flinched, but didn't look up. He laughed, calling her "sushi girl," as he walked away. Emily's heart sank as she realized that this was how high school was going to be for her. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could take it. The bullying had escalated. What had started as small jabs and teasing had transformed into something more insidious. Tyler and his friends, Jake and Mia, seemed to make it their mission to make Emily's life at Pacific Grove high unbearable. It had been a week since Emily had felt the sting of their insults for the first time. But now, the weight of their cruelty seemed unrelenting. Every passing day felt like a new way for them to remind her how different she was, how out of place. She became hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper. It wasn't just the taunts anymore. Now they were out to humiliate her in public, stripping away any dignity she had left. On this particular day, Emily had been in the cafeteria, trying to slip under the radar as usual. She was sitting alone, picking at her sandwich, lost in the rhythm of her thoughts. Her surroundings faded away as she tried to block out the noise. The last thing she expected was for Tyler's group to approach her again. But approach her they did. As Tyler and his friends walked toward her table, Emily instinctively shrank back, but there was nowhere to hide. She sat still, trying to make herself as small as possible. Tyler grinned down at her, and for the first time, there was a malice in his eyes that sent a cold chill down her spine. Well, look who's sitting alone again," Tyler said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's the matter, MMA girl? No friends? Can't find anyone willing to sit with the weird new girl?" Emily didn't answer, keeping her eyes firmly on the table. She could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up her neck, but she refused to let him see how much it bothered her. Then, out of nowhere, Jake reached over and knocked her sandwich off the table, watching it hit the floor with a soft splat. Mia, who had been standing off to the side, stepped forward and nudged Emily's lunch tray with her foot, causing it to tilt and spill. The sandwich, now ruined, lay on the floor beneath the table. "Oops," Jake said with a fake grin. "Guess your lunch is trash now, huh?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had always tried to keep a low profile, tried to go unnoticed, but now they were mocking her in front of everyone. The humiliation felt unbearable. Every eye in the cafeteria was on her, and for a brief, horrible moment, she thought she might cry. But no, she wouldn't let them see that. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she stood up quickly, grabbed her tray, and without a word, walked out of the cafeteria. The laughter behind her echoed through the halls, and for a second, she felt like everyone was laughing at her, but the tears she had fought to hold back never came, not then, anyway. She was too angry. When she got to the restroom, Emily locked herself in a stall, her heart pounding. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her backpack, trying to calm her breathing. The shame and frustration bubbled inside her like a pressure cooker, threatening to explode. "Why?" she whispered to herself, barely able to keep the words from breaking her. "Why can't I just be left alone?" It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated, but this felt different. It was a deliberate attempt to break her, to strip away whatever pride she had left. Emily stared at her reflection in the mirror, trying to steady her breath. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, always pushing her, always telling her to be stronger. "You can handle this, Emily," he'd say. "You've got to be strong. Don't let them see you're hurt." But it was hard, so hard. The words "never" felt like they were meant for her. She wasn't like her father. She didn't want to be. But the anger bubbling inside her now, the deep, Gnawing frustration was beginning to feel like something she couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time she wondered, why had she never used the skills he had taught her? Why had she spent so long hiding from her potential? Her mind flashed back to her first day in the school gym, the way Mr. Carter had looked at her when he learned who her father was. He had been curious, but also respectful, urging her to join the school's MMA training. But Emily had always resisted. She didn't want to be just the fighter's daughter. She didn't want to be known for that. But now, after what had happened in the cafeteria, she wasn't sure she could keep pretending she didn't have a power inside her. She needed to find a way to stand up for herself, but she had no idea how. What if using her MMA training made her just as bad as the bullies? What if people saw her as a violent person, like they already expected her to be? Emily wiped her face, trying to push away the doubt. She couldn't afford to hide anymore. She had to do something, anything to regain control over her own life. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Emily's thoughts were consumed by the incident in the cafeteria. She couldn't stop replaying the humiliation over and over in her mind. Each time, she felt the knot in her stomach tighten. It wasn't just about the lunch, it was about everything she had endured in the past week. The isolation, the mocking, the feeling of being invisible. Every cruel word, every joke, every taunt, added up until she couldn't carry the weight any longer. By the time the bell rang at the end of the day, Emily was determined. She knew what she needed to do. She had to confront her fear and take control. She wasn't going to let Tyler and his friends keep doing this to her. She wasn't going to keep hiding in the shadows. The first step was clear. She needed to speak with Mr. Carter after school. Emily found him in the gym. The old wrestling mats were neatly stacked in the corner, and the faint smell of sweat and disinfectant hung in the air. Mr. Carter, a former MMA champion who now coached at the school, was standing by the training equipment, his arms folded. "Emily," he said, acknowledging her presence with a nod. "How can I help you?" Emily hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I want to learn how to defend myself." Mr. Carter's brow raised slightly, but his expression was warm, understanding. "You've been dealing with something, haven't you?" Emily nodded, the words sticking in her throat. "Tyler and his friends, they've been bullying me. It's been getting worse." "I see," Mr. Carter's voice softened. "It's not easy dealing with that kind of pressure, but it's also a chance to reclaim your strength." Emily nodded again, her voice shaking slightly as she continued. "I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want people to think I'm just some fighter." Mr. Carter gave her a gentle smile. "You're not your father, but you do have something inside you that can help you. I'm not asking you to fight everyone who crosses you, but I can help you learn to defend yourself and to stand up for who you really are, not just as someone's daughter, but as Emily Lee." Emily's heart raced as she processed his words. This was the first time someone had truly seen her, not as a product of her father's legacy, but as her own person. Maybe it wasn't so much about fighting back as it was about reclaiming her sense of self. "I'm ready," Emily said, her voice steadier now. "Teach me how," Mr. Carter smiled. "All right, let's get started." For the next hour, Emily trained. At first, she struggled with the moves, her body stiff, unsure, but as the minutes passed, she began to let go of her doubts. With each move, she started to feel something within her shift: confidence, strength, power. It wasn't about using force. It was about knowing her own limits and finding her own boundaries. It was about having control over herself, her body, her emotions. As she practiced, she realized something profound. She wasn't just training her body. She was training her mind, learning how to stand tall and face what had always terrified her. When the session ended, Emily wiped the sweat from her forehead, a small, determined smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She had taken the first step toward embracing who she truly was, and she was ready for whatever came next. As she left the gym that evening, she felt a quiet sense of empowerment. The next time Tyler and his group tried to tear her down, she would be ready. The next few days at Pacific Grove High felt different. Emily walked through the hallways with her head held a little higher, her steps firmer. The training with Mr. Carter had done something to her, something she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the physical moves or the techniques. It was the way she felt inside, stronger, more confident. She felt like she could finally face the bullies who had tormented her. And she was ready to do just that. The opportunity came sooner than she had hoped. It was another typical school day, and Emily was sitting alone at lunch. She had grown accustomed to the isolation, the way Tyler and his friends hovered just outside her reach, teasing her from a distance. But today, they were different. They had planned something new. Emily could sense it the moment they walked into the cafeteria. Tyler, with that familiar smirk, led the group of his friends Jake and Mia trailing behind. As soon as they saw Emily sitting at her table, they converged on her. But something was different this time. They didn't just aim to make her feel small, they were trying to provoke her. They had made sure everyone was watching. "Hey, I'm a girl," Tyler sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone around them to hear. "I was thinking about what you said the other day. You know, about defending yourself. Looks like you've been practicing, huh? You should show us what you've got." Emily's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deep breath. The crowd around her had started to gather, sensing the tension. They were waiting for her to react. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Tyler," Emily replied, her voice steady but firm. "But I am done being your target." For a moment, the group was silent, their grins faltering. Jake shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh or back off, but Tyler was too proud to let it go. He stepped closer to Emily, his chest puffed out as though he was daring her to make a move. "You think you're special, don't you?" he taunted. "Just because your dad was a fighter, you think you can fight me too? Maybe I should teach you a lesson." Emily stood up slowly, her body poised like a fighter. She wasn't backing down, not this time. She glanced around at the students who were watching, and a sense of clarity washed over her. This wasn't about Tyler or his group anymore. This was about her, her voice, her strength, her choice to no longer be a victim. "Go ahead," she said, meeting Tyler's gaze without blinking. "Try it. I'm not the same girl you used to bully." There was a flicker of uncertainty in Tyler's eyes as he looked around at the group, but his pride kept him from backing down. He glanced at Jake, then at Mia, but they didn't offer him the comfort he was used to. The crowd was no longer on his side, and for the first time, Emily saw the smallest crack in his armor. "You really think you can take me on?" Tyler scoffed, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're just a scared little girl. No matter how much you've been practicing, you'll never be strong enough." With that, Emily stepped forward, her movements fluid and controlled. She didn't throw a punch, didn't use any violence at all. Instead, she used what Mr. Carter had taught her: confidence, presence, and the power of calm in a smooth motion. She blocked Tyler's attempt to push her, stepping out of his way and using his momentum to redirect him slightly. The action was quick, precise, and surprising. Tyler stumbled forward, catching himself just in time. The cafeteria went dead silent. No one had expected this, not from Emily. The bullies were stunned. For a moment, Tyler stood there, his chest heaving, staring at Emily in disbelief. The power dynamics had shifted, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. "You're right," Emily said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not the same girl, and I'm not going to let you push me around anymore." The crowd erupted in quiet murmurs. Some students looked at her with new respect, while others seemed to shrink away, realizing they were witnessing something they hadn't expected. Tyler, his pride wounded, turned on his heel and walked away, his group following behind him in awkward silence. They didn't have the strength to confront her now, not when the entire cafeteria had seen them falter. Emily stood there for a few moments longer, feeling the eyes of the students on her. But this time, she didn't feel small. She felt powerful. The days after the confrontation felt different. Emily wasn't the shy, reserved girl anymore. She had stepped into herself, and it showed. Students at Pacific Grove High treated her differently. Some whispered about what had happened in the cafeteria, their voices filled with awe and curiosity. Others, especially Tyler's former followers, looked at her with a mix of respect and wariness. They had seen her stand up for herself, and that had made them rethink their assumptions about her. In the halls, Emily began to notice the way her classmates looked at her now. There was no longer the familiar sneer or mocking laughter from Tyler's group. Instead, some of them, people she had never spoken to, gave her quiet nods of approval. It was as if the power had shifted, and she was no longer the prey. She had become someone others could respect, even if they didn't know her well. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the library working on homework, Sarah approached her. Emily looked up, surprised, and smiled softly. "Hey," Sarah said, sitting down beside her. "That was amazing the other day. You really stood up to him. I mean, I've never seen someone do that to Tyler before. He single quotes s. Well, he's not used to being put in his place." Emily shrugged, trying to downplay it. "I didn't want to back down anymore. I don't want to be that person who just gets pushed around." Sarah smiled, her eyes full of admiration. "I get that. It's like you found your voice." Emily nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It feels different, like I'm not carrying this weight anymore, but I'm still figuring it out." Sarah laughed lightly. "We all are. But you're stronger than you think, Emily." The words felt comforting, and Emily found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't before. Sarah was the first person who had shown her true kindness in a while, and Emily was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, this school could be a place where she didn't have to hide. As the weeks passed, Emily began to trust herself more. She continued training with Mr. Carter, honing her skills not just for self-defense, but as a way to remind herself of her inner strength. Her father's legacy was still there, but it no longer weighed her down. It had become a part of her, something she could use to empower herself rather than hide behind. Even the teachers began to notice the change in her. Mrs. Lopez, her history teacher, commented on her newfound confidence in class. Mr. Carter encouraged her to join the school's MMA club, where she could train and meet others who shared her interests. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she was standing on her own 2 feet, not just as the quiet girl from a small town, but as Emily Lee, a person capable of taking control of her life. The ripple effect of her actions had begun to spread. And the bullies, now deflated, had begun to realize that they no longer had the power to define her. Emily's newfound confidence was quickly becoming known throughout Pacific Grove High. She had faced down Tyler Reynolds and his group without flinching, and as the days went on, the school atmosphere began to shift. Tyler, once the undisputed king of the social hierarchy, now found himself at the center of ridicule for the first time in his life. The respect he commanded seemed to slip through his fingers as more students took notice of Emily's courage. But Tyler wasn't the type to back down without a fight. Humiliation, as he saw it, was a challenge. And his pride wasn't something he was willing to relinquish. For the first time, he began to plot. He couldn't let Emily's public display of strength go unanswered. His reputation, his status as the popular quarterback, depended on putting people like Emily in their place. So he and his friends, Jake and Mia, began to hatch a plan. Way to strike back at the girl who had dared to challenge him. The opportunity came when the school announced the upcoming talent show. It was a big event at Pacific Grove High, and everyone looked forward to it. Performances ranged from music to dance to magic tricks, and even a few comedy skits. Tyler's group saw it as the perfect chance to humiliate Emily once and for all. They would perform a skit, one that poked fun at her MMA background and made a mockery of her quiet, reserved personality. Emily had no idea what they were planning, but Sarah did. Sarah had been aware of the group's increasing animosity toward Emily since the confrontation in the cafeteria, and when she overheard Tyler and his friends discussing their talent show plans, she knew what they intended. The night of the talent show, Emily entered the auditorium with her heart pounding. She didn't know what to expect, but she had a gut feeling that something was coming. Sarah, sitting beside her, gave her a reassuring smile. "You're going to be amazing," Sarah said quietly, squeezing her hand. Emily returned the smile, though. It felt a little strained. She wasn't sure how she was going to handle whatever Tyler's group had in store, but she had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to let them get to her again. Not this time. As the night wore on, the talent show performances came and went. Students and teachers applauded each act, but the tension in the room seemed to build as Tyler's group prepared for their turn. When they finally took the stage, Emily could feel the eyes of the entire school on them. Tyler stood front and center, grinning as he prepared to begin. The skit they performed was crude and calculated. It was a satirical take on Emily's background, her father's MMA career, her quiet demeanor, and her status as the new girl. Tyler and Jake pretended to fight on stage, mocking Emma moves in an exaggerated, over-the-top fashion, while Mia played the role of Emily. They caricatured everything about her accent, her clumsiness, even her quietness. The audience, unsure whether to laugh or feel uncomfortable, shifted in their seats. Some snickered, while others shifted uncomfortably, but Emily didn't flinch. She sat still in the audience, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair, her heart beating in her chest. The prank was obvious. It was cruel. It was intended to hurt her, but Emily wouldn't let it. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. As the skit ended, the audience hesitated, unsure how to react. Tyler and his friends basked in what they thought was a triumphant performance, but the laughter they were expecting didn't come. Instead, there was an awkward silence. Emily's face, calm and composed, had not betrayed her. And that, in itself, was enough to throw off their confidence. When the lights dimmed, Emily stood up and walked toward the stage. The room went silent. All eyes were on her as she stepped into the spotlight. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, but she no longer cared. The humiliation from earlier Tyler's prank, the cruel jokes, none of it mattered anymore. Her voice rang out, clear and strong, as she addressed the room. "You think it's funny, don't you? To make fun of someone for being different, for being quiet, for having a background you don't understand." The students in the auditorium were still, their attention completely focused on Emily. Her words carried an undeniable weight. "I'm not ashamed of who I am," she continued. "I don't need to be loud to be heard. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. But what I won't stand for is people trying to tear others down just to make themselves feel better." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I don't need to fight with my fists to make my point. I can fight with my actions. And tonight, I'm not letting anyone disrespect me or my journey." With that, Emily stepped back and took her position in the center of the stage. The audience watched, mesmerized, as Emily began to move, not in anger, but in calm, controlled grace. She executed a series of MMA-inspired moves, fluid and precise, blending martial arts with dance. It wasn't a fight. It was an expression of strength, of power, of her own identity. Her performance captivated the crowd. The silence that had surrounded the auditorium shifted into admiration. Emily's movements, so precise and controlled, spoke volumes. This was not a girl who needed to be anyone else. She had found her voice on her own terms. When the performance ended, the room erupted in applause. The entire auditorium rose to their feet, cheering for Emily. Even Tyler's group stood, stunned, unable to say a word. Their prank had backfired in a way they never expected. As Emily stepped off the stage, her heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear or anxiety. It was from empowerment. She had taken control of the narrative of her life, her story. The cheering was deafening, and she could feel the shift in the room. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she realized her power didn't come from avoiding conflict, it came from embracing who she truly was. Backstage, Sarah rushed to her side, grinning. "That was incredible. You owned that stage." Emily smiled, breathless but exhilarated. "I didn't just perform for them. I performed for myself." As they walked back to their seats, Emily's eyes met Tyler's. He stood near the back of the auditorium, his face flushed with embarrassment. Mia, Jake, and the rest of the group hovered around him, but Tyler no longer carried himself with the same arrogance. His pride had been shattered in front of the entire school. Emily hadn't needed to fight him physically. Her actions had done what words alone never could. She had silenced him. The rest of the talent show was a blur to Emily, the joy of her performance lingering in the air. She had proven something not only to Tyler and his group, but to herself. She was more than just the quiet, shy girl from a small town. She was strong, capable, and unapologetically herself. The night ended with a sense of victory, a victory not over her tormentors, but over the version of herself she had once been. Emily had finally found her place at Pacific Grove High, and from that moment on, no one would ever try to push her around again. The aftermath of Emily's performance rippled through Pacific Grove High. Her bravery and confidence left a lasting impression on her peers, who began to see her in a new light. Tyler and his group, on the other hand, faced the consequences of their actions. The school administration, prompted by students who had witnessed the bullying and Emily's confrontation, began an investigation. Emily didn't seek retribution. She wasn't out for revenge. But the school couldn't ignore what had happened, especially after the talent show. Principal Lawson, a no-nonsense figure, took the matter seriously. Tyler, Jake, and Mia were called into his office. The school policy on bullying was clear, and after a series of discussions, the trio faced a week-long suspension. It wasn't a punishment that would undo the hurt they had caused, but it was a clear message. Bullying wouldn't be tolerated. Emily didn't take pleasure in their punishment. She didn't want them to suffer. She just wanted them to understand the weight of their actions. That night, as she walked down the hall after school, she overheard a conversation between some of her classmates. "Did you hear? Tyler and his crew are suspended." Emily must have really gotten to him. One student whispered. The admiration in their voices wasn't lost on her. Emily wasn't just gaining respect from her peers, she was starting to change the culture around her. Pacific Grove High wasn't going to forget what had happened, and neither was she. Weeks passed, and life at Pacific Grove High continued. The whispers and the stares had faded, replaced by quiet nods of respect. Emily was no longer the shy transfer student hiding in the shadows. She had transformed, and the school had witnessed it. One afternoon, Principal Lawson called Emily into his office. He had been watching her progress closely, and after a conversation with Mr. Carter, had an idea. "Emily," he began, "you've shown remarkable courage and strength this year. I think you could make a real difference here. I'd like to invite you to help lead a new self-defense club at school." The invitation took Emily by surprise, but she felt a sense of pride swelling within her. It was an opportunity she couldn't turn down. "I'd be honored," she replied, her voice steady. And so, Emily started the Self-Defense Club, offering other students the same tools of empowerment she had discovered through her MMA training. She became a mentor, helping others find their voice and stand up for themselves. Her experience had not only transformed her, but had also inspired others to embrace their strength. Tyler and his friends, though suspended, eventually returned to school. But something had changed in them too. Tyler, no longer the unchallenged king of the school, began to keep to himself. Emily didn't seek an apology, but one day, as she passed him in the hallway, he spoke. "I didn't get it, Emily," he said quietly. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." Emily paused, looking at him. His eyes were genuine, and though the apology wasn't perfect, it was enough. "Thank you, Tyler," she said softly. "I hope you can understand what you've done and do better." And with that, Emily walked away, knowing she had not only changed her own path but had inspired others to reflect, grow, and choose kindness over cruelty. The future was no longer something she feared. It was a future she was ready to embrace with strength and confidence, knowing that no matter what came her way, she had the power to stand tall. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.